Captain Lucas Hayes stood at the command station of the Star Voyager, the sleek human warship cutting through the empty darkness of space. The crew was calm, unaware of the danger slowly closing in. The stars blinked quietly in the distance, a peaceful backdrop to the tense silence of the bridge. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound, but there was an edge to it, like the calm before a storm. Hayes studied the view screen, his eyes scanning the shifting lights of distant stars, when suddenly the silence was shattered. A horrible, screeching noise rang out across the ship. The sound was alien, terrifying, and it felt like it pierced through the very heart of the ship. Alarms blared to life, red lights flashing wildly as the crew scrambled to respond. "What the hell was that?" Hayes muttered to himself. He turned to the communications officer, whose face had gone pale as the creature's terrifying scream reverberated through the ship. "Captain!" the officer shouted, pointing to the screen. "We're picking up something large, fast-moving on the scanners. It's not on any of our charts." Hayes's chest tightened as he quickly moved to the helm. The ship's scanners, advanced as they were, couldn't make sense of the sudden signal. Something was coming toward them, and it wasn't human. Hayes barked orders. "Shields up! All defense drones, activate!" His voice was calm, but his mind raced. They were in uncharted space, far from any known ally or support. If whatever was approaching was hostile, they were on their own. Just as the last word left his lips, the creature appeared on the screen. It was enormous, its sleek, dark body blending with the shadows of the moon it had been hiding behind. The alien predator had multiple glowing eyes, each one like a blazing orb of malice. Its massive form stretched for hundreds of meters, each step it took shaking the space around it. Razor-sharp claws extended from its arms, twitching as it moved toward the ship. The sheer size and monstrous appearance sent a chill down Hayes's spine. His instinct told him this was no ordinary alien. It was something older, more terrifying, and far stronger than anything they'd ever encountered. Without warning, the beast let out another gut-wrenching roar, and before the crew could respond, it fired a massive beam of energy from its mouth. The shot hit the Star Voyager with such force that the entire ship lurched. Sparks flew from the control panels as lights flickered, and the floor seemed to tilt beneath Hayes's feet. The ship groaned under the attack, and the sound of alarms intensified, causing the crew to stumble. "Damage report!" Hayes demanded, gripping the edge of his chair to steady himself. "We've lost power to the aft engines. Shields are holding, but they won't last long," the chief engineer shouted. "Get the drones out there," Hayes ordered. His voice was firm, but panic flickered in his chest. The ship was bleeding power, and the monster was only getting closer. He knew they had limited time before they were vulnerable. The defense drones launched from the ship, shooting toward the creature with missiles and plasma rounds. But the monster wasn't fazed. Its thick, scaly hide absorbed the blasts as if they were nothing. Each missile exploded harmlessly against its skin, leaving it unharmed and still charging forward. "Captain, nothing's working." "We can't hold it off," the weapons officer called out, desperation creeping into her voice. Hayes stood frozen, his mind racing for a solution. He had always known that human forces could face challenges, but this was different. This was no battle. They were outmatched, outgunned, and running out of options. The thought of retreating didn't even cross his mind. They had to survive. They had to fight. But just as hope seemed to fade, a new voice cut through the panic. "I can help." Hayes whipped around to see a woman, an alien, standing in the middle of the bridge. She had silver hair that shimmered like stardust, and her glowing blue eyes fixed him with an intensity that was almost otherworldly. She wore armor of unknown design, sleek and glowing with a soft light. She didn't look frightened or confused by the chaos around her. In fact, she seemed completely calm. "Who are you?" Hayes asked, his voice rough from the tension. "I am Arkali," she answered, her gaze never leaving the screen. "And I'm not your enemy." With those words, the mysterious woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. "You can fight it, but you won't win. Not with weapons like these." She gestured at the ship's damaged defenses. "If you want to survive, you'll need to listen to me." Hayes stared at her, unsure what to make of the situation. An unknown alien appearing on his ship in the middle of a life-or-death battle? But something in her calm, confident demeanor told him that she wasn't lying. If she was offering help, they didn't have much of a choice. "All right, what do we do?" And so, just when all hope seemed lost, the human crew found an unexpected ally, one that would change the course of the battle and their lives. The air was thick with smoke and tension as Arkali stepped closer to the command console, her fingers glowing faintly as she touched the surface. The systems responded instantly, almost like they recognized her presence. Lucas Hayes watched, stunned, as alien symbols flashed across the screen, changing the ship's display. "What are you doing?" he asked, but she didn't look up. Her voice was calm, steady. "Giving your ship a chance to live." A deep hum filled the room, and then the view on the screen shifted. The monster outside, still tearing through space, with terrifying speed, seemed to pause, almost as if it sensed something had changed. Arkali raised her hand, and a pulse of blue light shot from the ship's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the beast let out a screech and recoiled slightly, stunned. "That got its attention," she said, eyes focused. The crew stood, frozen, unsure whether to celebrate or brace for another attack. Hayes couldn't believe what he was seeing. "What is that thing?" he asked, heart pounding. Arkali finally turned to him. "It's called a Nargul, a predator born in the black gaps between galaxies. It hunts energy, life. Whole civilizations have fallen to it. My people tried to trap it centuries ago, but it escaped, and now it's awake again." Her words were heavy with memory, pain, and something else, guilt. Hayes nodded slowly. "Then we finish what your people started." As the ship trembled again under the weight of another blast, Arkali moved quickly. "We must draw it away from your engines and lure it toward the asteroid belt ahead. If we can trap it inside the gravitational storm, we may have a chance to destroy it." Hayes turned to his pilot. "Plot a course to the belt, full speed." The Star Voyager, damaged, but not defeated, surged forward. The Nargul gave chase, its many limbs stretching and bending unnaturally, tearing through the void behind them. Inside the ship, the crew worked desperately to hold systems together. Sparks flew, pipes hissed, and damage reports flooded the screens. Arkali stayed close to Hayes, giving him instructions, telling him when to boost, when to turn, when to fake a stall to trick the beast. She moved like someone who had done this before, someone who had lived through worse. And even though none of them had ever seen her kind, something about her gave the crew hope. She didn't act like a savior or a hero, just someone who wasn't ready to give up. Outside, the asteroid belt loomed closer. Massive rocks spun wildly through space, some glowing from hidden energy veins. Arkali pointed to a cluster of bright asteroids in the center. "There. The storm starts there. If we fly in fast, the creature will follow. But once we're in, we'll only have minutes before the belt collapses. That's when you strike, with everything you have." Hayes nodded and turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the neutron core. We'll use it as a bomb. One shot, one chance. The officer swallowed hard and nodded. As the ship dived into the storm, everything shook. Gravity twisted, lights flickered, and alarms screamed, but the Nargle kept coming. It slammed into rocks, swatting them aside like dust. The creature was too close now, too big, too angry, and that's when our Kali made her move. She ran toward the rear launch bay and pulled a strange, glowing device from her belt. Hayes chased after her, shouting, "What are you doing?" She looked back only once. Finishing what my people couldn't. Then she jumped into the bay, opened the outer door, and launched herself into space, straight toward the monster, holding the device close to her chest. The crew watched in stunned silence as the alien woman flew at the beast, glowing like a star, just as Hayes fired the neutron core from the ship. The two forces met, our Kali and the bomb, right at the heart of the Nargle. And then, there was nothing but light. The sky outside exploded in silence. The ship was thrown backward, by the shockwave, tossed like a toy. Hayes screamed her name, but there was no answer. Only stars. And quiet. The silence after the explosion was deafening. The crew of the Star Voyager floated in a stunned daze, barely able to believe what had just happened. Sparks still flickered from damaged panels, and the ship's systems groaned as they tried to recover from the shockwave. Captain Hayes sat slumped in his command chair, eyes fixed on the view screen, where a faint blue glow still shimmered in the distance, fading slowly where the monster had once been. There was no sign of our Kali, no voice on the comms, just empty space. The crew began running system checks, whispering to each other as if afraid to break the strange silence that hung over them. Hayes didn't speak. His mind replayed that final moment, the way she had looked back at him with calm eyes before launching herself toward the beast. She had saved them all, sacrificed herself without hesitation, for a ship of strangers. As minutes passed, something odd began to happen. A blinking signal appeared on the screen, small, faint, but definitely there. The sensors had picked up a life sign, weak but present, floating near the outer edge of the asteroid field. Hayes jumped to his feet. "Lock! Onto it!" he shouted, hope rushing into his chest. The crew worked fast, adjusting the scanners and activating the ship's tractor beam. The signal grew stronger, and slowly, a shape appeared. A small escape pod, its surface scorched and cracked. It looked like it had barely held together. "Bring it in," Hayes ordered. The crew held their breath as the pod was pulled into the docking bay. A hiss of air, a sudden clank, and then the bay doors closed behind it. Hayes rushed down to the bay himself, heart pounding in his ears. The pod door creaked open with a hiss, and out stumbled our Kali, weak and bruised, her silver hair messy, and her skin covered in dark marks from the explosion. But she was alive. The crew stared, and then someone began to clap. Others joined in. It started slow, almost uncertain, but it grew louder, stronger, until the whole bay echoed with applause. Our Kali looked surprised, even confused, as Hayes stepped forward. "You made it," he said, trying not to sound too shaken. She gave him a tired smile. "Barely." Medics moved in to help her, but she waved them off gently. Her eyes were still sharp, still glowing, though her body swayed from exhaustion. Hayes guided her to a bench, and they sat together, the noise around them fading into background sound. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "That was suicide." She looked at him, then shook her head. "It was duty. My people ran from that monster once. I couldn't do it again." But I didn't expect you to follow me, or risk your crew to help trap it. Hayes shrugged. That's what humans do. We don't run from monsters. There was a pause between them, filled only by the low hum of the ship. Then she leaned closer, her voice softer. Most species fear death more than they love others. But you're people. You choose to fight, even when it's hopeless. I never understood that. Her hand brushed against his, and for the first time, her expression softened. Not with duty, but something more personal. But now I do. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. Welcome to the crew, Arkali. That night, as the Star Voyager floated quietly among the stars, repairs began. Damage was everywhere. But the spirit of the crew had changed. They had seen something impossible, survived something ancient. And standing among them was an alien warrior who had once been a stranger. But now, to many, felt like one of their own. The calm didn't last. Only 2 days after the battle with the Nargul, long-range sensors picked up something terrifying. Another signal, far stronger than before. At first the crew thought it was a leftover echo from the destroyed beast. But Arkali's face turned pale when she saw the data. It's not an echo, she said in a low voice. It's a call. The Nargul's final scream had acted like a beacon, waking more creatures just like it. Worse, this one was even bigger. A massive shape moved through the outer edges of the galaxy, eating light, warping space, pulling debris into its massive mouth. Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. The Star Voyager wasn't ready. Systems were still damaged. Weapons barely worked. Shields were at half power. They had just survived the last attack. There was no way they could take on a second one alone. The crew gathered around the central map room as Arkali explained what they faced. This one is called the Morning Star. It doesn't just kill. It wipes memory. Whole planets forget themselves before it even arrives. It has been sleeping for centuries, but now it's coming. Hayes made the call to the nearest human fleet, sending an emergency signal across several star systems. It would take time for reinforcements to arrive, if they did at all. Until then, the Star Voyager had one job: slow the Morning Star down. Arkali warned them that the creature fed on fear and confusion. It grows stronger when you doubt yourselves, she said. That's why we have to be clear in our minds and loud in our hearts. The crew didn't fully understand, but they trusted her now. She had proven herself in the fire, and somehow, knowing she was with them, made the impossible feel survivable. The ship turned toward the oncoming threat. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the Morning Star approached. Its body was like a black hole wrapped in armor, shifting, and alive, made of shadow and steel. It didn't roar like the Nargul. It simply moved, slow and certain, swallowing everything in its path. Hayes stood on the bridge, watching it come closer. If we're going to die, he said to Arkali, I'd like to do it fighting. She didn't smile, but there was something like pride in her eyes. Then let's make our final stand one the galaxy remembers. They launched drones first, trying to distract the creature. It didn't work. Then they tried to blind it with high-frequency flares, but the Morning Star simply absorbed the light. It kept coming. They flew closer to a nearby gas giant and released shock charges into its atmosphere, hoping the explosion would shake the creature. But again, it moved through like nothing had happened. Nothing slows it down, one of the crew muttered. Arkali stepped forward. There is one thing it fears, she said. A sound, A song my people sang long ago, pure, full of defiance. It can't consume what resists it with joy, but it must be sung by a living voice. Hayes stared at her. Are you saying sing to it? Yes, she said. But not just me. All of you. It sounded insane. Laughable even. But there was something in her voice. Something strong, ancient, and steady. And in that moment, as the shadow of the morning star fell over them, the crew began to sing. At first it was quiet, just a hum, then a melody. And slowly, voices rose together, raw, human, full of fear and courage. Our collie joined in, her voice weaving through theirs like light in darkness. The ship echoed with music, the sound bouncing through every corridor, reaching out into space. And for the first time, the morning star paused. The morning star hesitated, its vast form slowing as the song of resistance reached its ears. It wasn't like any battle they had fought before. This wasn't about weapons or tactics. It was about something deeper, something pure and undefinable. As the crew of the Star Voyager sang, their voices trembling but growing stronger with every word, the shadow of the morning star seemed to shift. It flinched, as though trying to shield itself from the sound, but it couldn't. The music filled, the space between stars, expanding like a wave of light, pushing against the dark. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. The creature was more than just an enemy. It was an ancient force, built to swallow everything in its path, and yet it was being affected by something as simple as a song. As the crew continued to sing, their voices melding into one unified sound, they could feel the creature's resistance weaken. The morning star began to tremble, its massive form vibrating with an unnatural energy. For a moment, it seemed as if the galaxy itself had held its breath. Then, with a horrific screech, the morning star started to twist, its body warping as it struggled against the pure defiance that was being thrust at it. The creature's shape flickered, as if the sound was unraveling its very existence. Arcali's eyes shone with determination. She had known this was possible, but she hadn't expected it to be so powerful. Her people had sung this song to fight back the darkness of their own time, but she had never imagined that a human crew, with their own history of defiance, could join in and make it work. Hayes felt a surge of energy, something beyond just survival, something that made him believe that they could win. For a fleeting moment, the Star Voyager felt invincible. But as the morning star began to collapse, its massive form starting to fold in on itself, the crew knew that it wasn't over yet. The morning star may have been stunned, but it was still alive, and its hunger hadn't been fully sated. Arcali's voice cut through the tension. This won't hold it for long. It's a predator. Its survival instinct is too strong. We need to finish this. The moment of weakness was fleeting, and the morning star was beginning to regain its strength. Hayes's mind raced. We've got one shot. The neutron core. If we can get close enough. Arcali nodded, her expression grave. The song has made it weak, but it still has power. We need to trap it in a space where it can't escape. Hayes turned to his crew, determination setting in. They had no time to waste. Set a course for the center of the system, he ordered. We're going to make it fight for every second. The Star Voyager hurtled toward the heart of the system, pushing the ship to its limits. The morning star, sensing its prey was slipping away, charged after them, its form reforming, reshaping, growing more monstrous by the second. The crew braced themselves. Every system groaned under the strain as the ship made its final approach. "Activate the core!" Hayes shouted. his voice cutting through the chaos. The neutron core, the one weapon they had left, was locked and ready. Our collie stood beside him, her eyes filled with resolve. "We have to time this perfectly," she warned. "The Morning Star won't be this weak for long." With a final command, Hayes fired the core, sending it straight into the heart of the creature. The impact was like a thunderclap. The Morning Star shuddered violently, its body writhing as the core detonated inside it, the explosion filling space with light. The force of the blast sent shock waves through the surrounding system, and the Star Voyager was thrown backward, its systems flickering and struggling to stay online. The crew hung on, their hearts racing as the dust of the explosion began to clear. Slowly, as the light faded, the Morning Star's form crumbled, its once imposing mass now nothing but a cloud of dissipating shadows and debris. It was over. The creature was gone. The ship floated in the silence that followed, the crew staring out at the remnants of their battle. They had faced the impossible, stood against the darkness of the universe, and had won. But there was no time for celebration yet. They were far from home, their ship barely holding together, and they didn't know what other threats might be, waiting for them. Still, as Hayes looked around at his crew, at the survivors who had stood together against an ancient monster, he felt something stronger than fear. It was a fierce, undeniable pride. "We did it," he said softly, his voice barely audible in the aftermath. Our collie stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes filled with something new, a deep respect for humanity. "Yes," she agreed. "You did." In the aftermath of the battle, the Star Voyager drifted silently through space, its crew exhausted, but victorious. The Morning Star, once a nearly unbeatable force of destruction, was no more, reduced to space debris scattered across the system. Yet, despite their triumph, there was no celebration. The ship was damaged, the crew was bruised, and they were still far from home. The silence was heavy, filled with the realization that their survival had come at a cost. They had faced a threat beyond anything they had ever imagined, and though they had won, the true impact of the battle hadn't fully settled in. Hayes stood at the bridge, staring out into the dark void, reflecting on what had just happened. He had led his crew through a nightmare, and they had come out on the other side, alive. But how long would that victory last? What other dangers awaited them in the vast unknown? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. They had changed. They were no longer just a crew of explorers. They were warriors, survivors, and they had earned a place in the history of the galaxy. Behind him, Arkali entered the bridge, her footsteps light but firm. She had recovered from the fight, but there was still a quiet sadness in her eyes. She stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. "We did it," she said softly, though the words felt different coming from her, more like a reflection of something deeper, something she hadn't expected to find among humans. She had come to them as an outsider, a warrior from a faraway world, but now she understood. The humanity she had once found so strange, so fragile, had proven itself capable of standing against the darkness of the galaxy. Hayes turned to her, his gaze steady. "Yeah, we did. And you were a part of it." Arkali nodded, her eyes lingering on him for a moment before she spoke again. "I never thought humans would be able to do what you did. Your strength, it's different from ours. You fight because you have to, but you also fight because you want to. That's something we haven't understood until now." She paused, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I see it now. It's not just survival with you, it's hope. and that is a power none of us can match. Hayes smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. We fight because we don't give up, not when there's still a chance. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable now. It was understanding. The bond between them, forged in the heat of battle, had become something more than just an alliance between species. It was a connection built on respect, trust, and the shared understanding that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always hope. The ship's alarm suddenly blared, breaking the quiet moment. Hayes snapped back into command mode, instinctively turning toward the control panels. "What is it?" he barked. The crew quickly scrambled to their stations, their earlier exhaustion forgotten as the need for action returned. "We're picking up a distress signal," one of the officers reported. "It's coming from a nearby colony, and it's bad. They're under attack." Hayes's mind raced. After everything they had just gone through, this new threat seemed almost too much to bear. But he didn't hesitate. He knew the decision before the words even left his mouth. "Set a course," he ordered. "We're going to help them." As the Star Voyager turned its course toward the distress signal, Hayes looked at our collie once more. She nodded to him, understanding the unspoken challenge. They weren't done yet. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just shown it was ready to face whatever it threw their way. With a deep breath, Hayes stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. Together with our collie and his crew, they would continue to fight, continue to survive, and continue to prove that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, no matter the odds, no matter the monster.